Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? Today, I'm going to share a story from my life, one that turned my world upside down. A single moment of unexpected connection changed what should have been a normal home repair into something neither of us could have predicted. The burst pipe had brought him to my door, professional, focused, just there to fix a leak. But as he worked beneath my sink, what began as casual small talk slowly turned into something more. A single glance lingered too long. His eyes locked with mine as he handed me a wrench. Our fingers touched, not by accident. We said nothing, but everything was felt. By the time he packed up his tools, something hung unspoken in the air. "I'll need to come back tomorrow to finish this," he said, his voice a little softer now. I nodded, both of us knowing tomorrow wasn't just about the plumbing anymore. I never thought the repair would take 3 days, or that, by day 3, the pipes would be the last thing on either of our minds. The call came at the worst possible moment. Water flooding across the kitchen floor, gushing from beneath the sink like a broken dam. I'd been working from home all week, buried in deadlines and Zoom meetings. A plumbing emergency was the last thing I needed. But there I was, trying to contain the mess with every towel I owned, frantically searching online for an emergency plumber. The woman who answered the phone sounded tired but capable. "We got someone who can be there in 30 minutes. Is that soon enough?" "Yes, please. As soon as possible," I said, eyeing the creeping water as it moved toward the living room. Those next 30 minutes were pure chaos. I ran towels back and forth from the kitchen to the bathroom. At the same time, my boss was bombarding me with emails about tomorrow's big presentation. By the time the doorbell rang, my socks were soaked, my nerves frayed. I flung the door open, expecting an older man with a name stitched on his uniform and a weary expression. Instead, I met someone entirely different. He looked like he was maybe my age, early 30s. Short dark hair, longer at the top, eyes a deep shade of copper. "I'm Ethan," he said, his voice calm and rich. "From Swift Fix Plumbing." "Right? I'm Natalie. I'm managed," stepping aside. "Kitchen's this way, it's a mess." He stepped inside, toolbox in one hand, and I caught a faint scent of cedar and something clean. The standard blue work uniform looked almost tailored on him, fitted across his shoulders like he spent as much time at the gym as he did on the job. "Whoa," he said, taking in the kitchen scene. "That's quite the leak." "Yeah, it started about 40 minutes ago," I said, pushing damp hair from my face. I turned off the main, but I gestured helplessly at the puddles glistening on the tile. Ethan nodded, setting his toolbox down and kneeling beside it. "You did the right thing shutting off the water. Let me take a look." I stepped back as he pulled out a flashlight and disappeared under the sink. There was something captivating about the way he moved, efficient, sure of himself. I caught myself staring at the way his shirt stretched across his back as he shifted to get a better look at the damage. "So you work from home?" His voice floated up from beneath the counter. "Yeah," I said, "marketing, mostly digital stuff." "Nice. No commute, right?" "It has its moments," I said, trying to look anywhere else. "But on days like this, I wish I had an office to run to." He chuckled, a warm, effortless sound. "I get that. All right, I think I found your issue. Split in the supply line. Pressure must have built up." He got to work, hands moving confidently, like he'd done this 1,000 times. And maybe he had. Still, there was something mesmerizing about watching someone who clearly knew what they were doing. It had been a long time since anyone had been in my space, aside from food delivery guys, and even longer since a man had stood in my kitchen who was a friend from years past. Since my breakup with James 6 months ago, my social life had pretty much dried up. A few awkward app dates, some half-hearted drinks with coworkers. Eventually, I deleted all the apps and threw myself into work. "Could you hand me that wrench?" Ethan's voice pulled me from the spiral. I knelt beside the toolbox, scanning the tools. "This one, the adjustable one on the right." I picked it up and crouched to pass it to him. Our hands brushed. His fingers were warm. Our eyes met. I noticed golden flecks in his irises, the stubble on his jaw, and suddenly, something shifted in the air between us. Just for a second. "Thanks," he said, voice quieter this time. I swallowed, clearing my throat. "No problem." He went back to work. I forced myself to focus on cleaning the floor, ignoring the unfamiliar flutter of warmth in my chest. It was silly. He was just a plumber. A handsome one, sure, but he was here to do a job. After about 20 minutes, Ethan emerged from under the sink, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Good news and bad news," he said. "Go ahead." I replied, leaning on the counter, heart still racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the leak. Ethan leaned against the counter. "Good news is, I fixed the immediate leak," he said, his voice steady. "Bad news, it's just a short-term fix. The pipe's corroded in several spots. You'll need to replace the whole section." I sighed, dragging my hand through my hair. "How long will that take?" "Normally, a couple of hours," he replied, glancing at his watch. "But I've got another emergency after this. I could come back tomorrow morning, first thing." "That's fine," I said, mentally adjusting to life without a kitchen for another day. "I'll survive until then." Ethan nodded, kneeling to pack up his tools. "I'll turn the water back on for the rest of the house, but the sink will need to stay off until I finish the job." "Understood. What time should I expect you?" "Would 8:30 work? I can make you my first stop." "Perfect," I said, walking him to the door. "Thanks for coming out so quickly." He gave a small smile, the kind that made something in my chest stir unexpectedly. "All part of the service. See you tomorrow, Natalie." I closed the door behind him, strangely aware of the silence that followed. It was just a home repair, I reminded myself, nothing more. And yet, as I returned to my laptop, I kept catching myself daydreaming about those copper-tone eyes and the quiet strength in his hands. That night, I barely slept. My nerves were tight from the upcoming presentation, and the half-working kitchen only added to the chaos. By the time morning arrived, I was already on my second cup of coffee, typing emails with one hand and clutching a toast crust with the other. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:30. Ethan stood there, looking unfairly fresh for someone who'd likely been up earlier than me. His hair was slightly damp, and though he wore the same blue work uniform, this one looked crisp, like it had just come from the dryer. "Morning," he said, smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Ready for surgery?" I stepped aside to let him in, suddenly conscious of the fact that I was still wearing sleep pants and an old band t-shirt. "Honestly, I forgot you were coming this early," I admitted with a weak laugh. "I've been up since 6 working on a presentation." "No worries," he said easily. "I'll work around you." I led him to the kitchen, where I cleared some space for my laptop. "I've got a video call in an hour. I can move to the bedroom if I'm away." He was already kneeling down to inspect the cabinet again. Shouldn't be too disruptive, though I might need to cut into the wall a bit to reach the full section of pipe. "Do whatever you need to," I said, settling into my seat. "I trust you." As I worked, I became hyper-aware of Ethan's presence. He moved methodically, spreading a tarp under the sink and lining up his tools in perfect order. Occasionally, he'd ask me to pass something or hold the flashlight. Each time, our fingers brushed, our eyes met, and every time that flutter of awareness returned. It was nothing, I told myself. Just chemistry, just politeness. But I noticed how his gaze sometimes lingered when he thought I was not looking, and how our conversations seemed to stretch longer than strictly necessary. "So, what's this presentation about?" he asked, measuring the old pipe. "New campaign for an eco-friendly clothing line," I replied, glancing up. "They want to appeal to Gen Z without sounding fake or overly polished." "Sounds tricky." "It is. I spent the whole weekend buried in TikTok research." I laughed. "I feel ancient and I'm only 32. He chuckled warmly. "I'm 34, and I still don't understand half the stuff my niece says." "You have a niece?" "2 nieces, and a nephew, my sister's kids." His face softened into a fond smile. "They're amazing and exhausting." "Do you have any kids of your own?" I asked, then immediately wondered if that was too personal. "No," he said without hesitation. "Haven't found the right person, or guy, I should say." My fingers paused on the keyboard. The way he said it, casually, without emphasis, caught me off guard. Was he saying it for me? Had he picked up on something? "Oh," I said, trying to sound equally relaxed. "Yeah, I get that." Our eyes met, just for a moment, and something unspoken passed between us. It was brief, but I saw it. A spark, a recognition, or maybe curiosity. Before either of us could say more, my laptop chimed with an incoming call. "That's my team," I said quickly, straightening my posture. "Need to take this." Ethan nodded and returned to his work. I slipped on my headset and greeted my colleagues, switching into professional mode. But throughout the video call, I remained painfully aware of Ethan's quiet movement behind me. The occasional clink of tools, the buzz of a power drill, the soft murmur of him muttering when something didn't fit quite right. At one point, he had to turn off the water main again. As he passed by, he caught my eye and mouthed a quick, "Sorry," with a sheepish smile. That same woodsy scent, subtle but now familiar, drifted past me again. I stumbled over my words on the call. "Natalie, did you hear the question?" my boss asked. "Sorry, there's some construction in the building." I lied, forcing myself to refocus. 40 minutes later, the meeting wrapped up. I leaned back in my chair and let out a sigh. "That sounded intense," Ethan said, standing up and wiping sweat from his brow. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong, tan forearms dusted with dark hair. "Not great," I admitted. "I may have just promised a full redesign by Friday." He winced in sympathy. "Sounds like you need a drink." "At 10 in the morning?" I asked with a laugh. "Maybe wait until I finish here," he grinned, "which might take longer than I thought." I raised a brow. "How much longer?" He sighed. "The corrosion's worse than I expected. I'll need more replacement parts. Stuff I don't have in the truck. I might need to run to the warehouse and come back tomorrow." I groaned, rubbing my temples. "So I'm stuck another day without a working kitchen?" "I'm really sorry," Ethan said, and he looked like he meant it. "I could come back later this afternoon, but it would probably be around 5:30 or 6. Might run into the evening a bit." I glanced at my calendar. Technically, I was free the rest of the day, aside from the redesign project I now had to tackle. Still, I shrugged. "I don't mind if it's later," I said. "I work from home anyway." Ethan nodded and began packing up his tools. "I'll be back at 5:30 then. Should be able to finish everything tonight, even if we go a little over." As he gathered his things, I hesitated. I found myself wondering if I should offer him a coffee. Just a cup of coffee. But the thought made my heart race like I was asking him out instead of offering something polite. "Would you like a coffee before you go?" I asked, the words tumbling out faster than I intended. I mean, it's just instant, since the kitchen's a disaster. His smile came easily and hit harder than I expected. "That would be great. Actually, black, no sugar." I focused on making the drinks, acutely aware of his presence in the doorway. When I handed him the mug, our fingers brushed again, longer this time, and he held my gaze. "Thanks," he said, his voice just a little deeper now. We stood in my messy kitchen, sipping coffee and talking about the unusually warm weather. It was ordinary conversation, the kind people forget. But somehow, every word felt heavier, every silence more meaningful. Time slowed down, and something invisible swirled between us. When he finished his coffee and placed the mug on the counter, I felt a small ache. "I should get going," he said, lifting his toolbox. "But I'll see you this evening, right?" 5:30. 5:30, I repeated. Our eyes met again, and the quiet intensity in his gaze caught me off guard. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in the half-demolished kitchen, wondering what exactly had just happened. The rest of the day blurred. I buried myself in emails and campaign edits, avoiding the clock, and yet constantly checking it. I told myself it was just a repair appointment. That was all, nothing more. But as the hours crept closer to 5:30, anticipation built like a low hum under my skin. At 5, I found myself standing in front of my closet, debating whether to change. It was ridiculous. He was a plumber, not a dinner date. And yet, I swapped my baggy t-shirt for a fresher one and ran a hand to my hair just to feel a little more human. When the doorbell rang at 5:35, I took a breath before answering. Ethan stood there, looking slightly more tired than before, but still unfairly attractive. He'd changed shirts, same blue uniform, but this one looked softer, lived in. "Hey," he said, smiling like we shared a secret. "Ready for round two?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, stepping back to let him in. He moved straight to the kitchen, toolbox in hand. "I brought everything we'll need. Shouldn't take more than a couple hours. Can I get you anything before you start? Water? More coffee?" He paused. "Water would be perfect. Thanks." I poured him a glass, and when I handed it to him, our fingers touched again. This time, I was sure it wasn't accidental. "Thanks," he said, locking eyes with me. "And thanks for being patient. Most customers get pretty frustrated when repairs take longer than expected. It's not your fault the pipes are a mess," I said with a shrug. "Besides, you're easy to have around." A slow smile tugged at his lips, and my heart fluttered. "Good to know," he said quietly, before turning to the work. I tried to focus on my laptop again, but my concentration dissolved. The kitchen felt smaller now. The air felt warmer. Charged. I kept inventing excuses to move. More water. Checking the clock. Pretending to look at my phone. Anything to be near him. At one point, he asked me to hold a pipe while he tightened the connector. We crouched together in the small space beneath the sink, shoulders brushing, his arm pressed against mine, firm and warm, and I could feel his breath on my cheek. "Almost there," he murmured. Focus on the fitting. I made the mistake of turning toward him. His face was inches from mine, his lips slightly parted, his eyes, golden and intense, locked on mine. Everything froze. For a breathless second, I thought he might kiss me, or maybe I would kiss him. But then he cleared his throat and turned back to pipe. "That should do it," he said, voice lower and rougher than before. I backed out from under the sink, my pulse racing. What was I doing? This was so unprofessional. He was here to fix my kitchen, not flirt. I needed to pull myself together. "I'm going to order dinner," I said abruptly, needing something to do. "Would you like anything? Since you're working through dinner and all." He stood, wiping his hand with a rag. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said, "but I always order too much anyway. Might as well share." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I won't say no to food." "Any preferences?" "Allergies." "I'm pretty easy," he said with a smile that sent a jolt straight to my chest. "Whatever you're having is fine." I opened the food app and ordered Thai from my favorite local spot, trying to concentrate on the menu instead of the man disassembling my kitchen wall. When I looked back up, he was checking something on his phone, brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, glancing up. His face softened. "Just double-checking the specs on this pipe layout. It's different. Old building," I said with a smirk. "Everything's got personality." He looked at me, really looked, and smiled. "I like personality." His words made my mouth go dry. "Quirky's interesting," he'd said, but it was more than the comment. The air between us thickened, humming with something unsaid. I opened my mouth to break the tension, to say anything at all, but nothing came. We just stared at each other, the silence stretching tight, fragile, electric. The sudden buzz of my phone shattered the moment. "That's probably the food," I said, grateful for the interruption. "I'll go grab it." I all but escaped to the door, my pulse racing. What was happening? Was I imagining the strange current between us? Was it just me? I took a breath before returning, determined to stay composed. Keep it light, keep it professional. But when I walked back into the kitchen, Ethan was standing by the counter, 2 beers in hand. From my fridge, his expression was relaxed, his smile unshakably warm. "Hope you don't mind," he said, holding one out to me. "Thought we could both use one." Our fingers touched as I took the bottle, intentionally, deliberately. This time, there was no mistaking it. "Thanks." I said, my voice a little breathless. We sat at my small kitchen table. Tools pushed aside, pipes forgotten for now. The space felt different, not just where we ate, but how we existed inside it. Conversation flowed easily. We talked about work, movies, the books we had half finished, and the ones we loved. He was funny, sharp, warm. I laughed more than I had in weeks. I found myself leaning in, caught up in his stories, drawn closer by the energy between us. So, how did you get into plumbing? I asked, genuinely curious. My dad worked in construction, he said. I used to help him during summers. Got good with my hands. He smiled, locking eyes with me a beat too long. Tried the office thing after college. Didn't stick. I like solving things with my hands. And honestly, the pay is better than people expect. I grinned, especially when you're saving kitchens from disaster at odd hours. He laughed and took a sip of his beer. Yeah, the emergencies add up. What about you, he asked. Always been in marketing? Mostly. I started out doing graphic design. Moved toward campaign strategy over time. I like the creative side, but I was never good enough at the art part to go all in. I doubt that, he said, his eyes soft and warm. You strike me as someone who's good at whatever they put their mind to. Again, that feeling. A heat building beneath the surface, pushing against the space between us. I took a long sip of my beer, trying to steady myself. The room felt smaller, more intimate, like something invisible was drawing us closer, dissolving whatever line had been there before. Ethan glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. I should probably finish up the repair, he said finally, but he didn't move. Right, I said, just as reluctant. It's getting late. Neither of us stood. The silence that followed was awkward. It was waiting, like the room itself was holding its breath. Our eyes met, and in that look, the pretense that this was just about plumbing, just a friendly exchange, crumbled completely. Natalie, he began, his voice lower, uncertain but steady. I hope I'm not misreading this, but... A loud buzz cut him off. He winced and checked his phone. Ugh, it's my boss. I nodded as he stepped into the living room to answer it. My heart pounded. My mind spun. What had he been about to say? Did he feel it too? This quiet, magnetic pull between us? He returned moments later, his expression filled with apology. I'm really sorry. There's a flood at another site. Big one. Apartment building. They need all hands. Of course. Life reality. Crashing back in. You should go. I said, try not to show the sharp sting of disappointment. I'll come back tomorrow, he said quickly, to finish the job. You don't have to. I want to, he said firmly, locking eyes with me. I'll be here at 8:30. If that works. I nodded, afraid my voice might betray me. He moved efficiently, gathering tools, explaining what he'd done and what was left. I followed him to the door, conscious of every breath between us. At the door, he hesitated, turned to face me. Natalie, about what I was going to say. It's okay, I interrupted gently. We can talk tomorrow. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Tomorrow, he repeated. And then, before I could react, he leaned in, not a full kiss, just a soft press of his lips against the corner of my mouth. Gentle, brief, intimate. Something to think about until then, he murmured, his voice a whisper against my skin. Then he was gone. I stood there, stunned, the door slowly closing in front of me. My skin tingled where he'd kissed me. My chest ached with something that had no name. I leaned against the door, as if the wood could hold me together. This was not what I expected when I called for a plumber. But as I touched my fingers to the spot where his lips had been, I knew. I didn't regret it, not even a little. The apartment felt different after he left. Still, empty. His scent, warm, woodsy, lingered in the air like a memory. I wandered back to the kitchen. The beers, half finished, still sat on the table. The dishes untouched. I should have cleaned. But instead, I stood there, brushing my fingers along the chair he'd occupied, wondering, did he feel it too? This pull, this connection, this something, unnamed but impossible to deny. I barely slept, Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that kitchen, hearing him laugh, watching the light in his eyes, replaying that quiet, breathless moment by the door where everything had changed. My thoughts circled endlessly, like a film stuck on one perfect frame. By morning, I was exhausted and anticipation buzzed under my skin. I kept checking the clock, like a teenager waiting for a prom date. Act normal, I told myself. Calm, composed. But it was useless. My nerves didn't get the memo. I showered longer than usual, letting the hot water run over my shoulders, trying to melt the restless energy away. I picked out an outfit, changed twice, then finally settled on something casual, but just flattering enough to feel intentional. He's just coming to fix the sink, I whispered to my reflection, tugging at my shirt. That's it. Get a grip. But my heart betrayed me every time I imagined the sound of his knock. And when the doorbell rang, right on time at 8:30, my heart leapt into my throat. I froze for a beat. Deep breath. One last smooth down on my shirt. Then I opened the door. Ethan stood there, not in his usual gray work shirt or cargo pants, but in dark jeans and a soft blue button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. The shirt brought out the warm tones, his eyes. He looked effortlessly put together, and yet something about the way he shifted on his feet, one hand in his pocket, said he was just as unsure as I was. Before I could speak, he cleared his throat, voice low and steady. "Hey!" I wasn't sure if this was okay, he said, but I figured I owed you a proper good morning. He paused and added, I called in and took a personal day. Told him I'd finish your job myself. Off the clock, if that's okay with you. I blinked, processing. You took a day off for my sink? A smile slowly spread across his face. Warm, a little shy, full of promise. Not exactly for the sink. The unspoken truth hung in the space between us like a held breath. It didn't need words. I stepped back, heart thundering. In that case, maybe we should talk before you finish the repair. I'd like that, he said softly, stepping inside. As I closed the door behind him, something inside me clicked. Not a door shutting, but one opening. Quiet, sure, irrevocable. What began as a plumbing emergency had unraveled into something far more complex. Something electric. Something neither of us had seen coming. But neither of us was trying to stop anymore. Ethan set the toolbox down with a quiet thud. It grounded the room in the present. But when he turned to face me, his eyes said something else entirely. They were steady, warm, full of emotion. His gaze didn't ask for permission. It offered a truth. He took a step forward. Then another. I met him halfway. Our mouths found each other. Not hesitant, not rushed, but as if they had always known their place. His kiss was sure, deeper than the one the night before. His hand slid to my waist, mine to his chest. I gripped the soft cotton of his shirt, feeling the solid warmth beneath. The world collapsed inward, to breath, to touch, to heat. Each movement felt deliberate, reverent. We were not rushing. We were remembering, as if our bodies already knew the story. He guided me slowly back, one step at a time, until my knees hit the couch. I sank down, pulling him with me, his weight comforting and grounding as it settled against mine. Fingers traced paths, down arms, across backs, mapping skin like territory we had half explored in our minds. Every breath was confession, every sigh a promise. His lips brushed my neck, his voice a low whisper against my skin. Natalie. The way he said my name, it felt new, like it meant something different now. Like I meant something different now. It wasn't just chemistry. It was layered. It was careful. It was connection made tangible. Everything before, the glances, the near touches, the subtle tension, had all led to this moment of release, of clarity, of something real being born in silence and breath. Later, we lay tangled on the couch. Morning light spilled through the blinds, painting gold lines across his shoulder. He traced lazy patterns along my arm, his touch feather-light. Neither of us spoke. The quiet wrapped around us like a blanket, not empty, but full. I turned toward him, head resting on his chest. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt content. Not because I knew what this was, but because I didn't, and that felt honest. Sometimes the most meaningful things arrive without warning, not with fanfare, but with presence, like water slipping through cracks, finding the places we didn't know needed filling. And now, I was ready to let it in. What started as a simple service call had become something intimate, unexpected, impossible to ignore. As Ethan turned his face to mine, eyes still soft with whatever we weren't saying, I realized that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewrites your story without asking. What now? The question hovered in my mind. Where do we go from here? Because this wasn't nothing. It couldn't be. But how could we explain it to anyone else? We hadn't followed the rules. We'd blurred lines, mixed roles, let feeling dictate pace. It was messy, maybe foolish, definitely complicated, but also real. I didn't know if this was love or timing or just the thrill of two lonely lives colliding. But I knew this. Something had changed, and there was no going back. Not after the way he kissed me. Not after the way I let him in. Not just into my home, but into my heart. Not after the way it all suddenly made sense. The truth was, I didn't have answers. Neither of us did. But as his fingers laced with mine, grounding me in the quiet morning, I didn't need them. Not yet, because some moments, rare, electric moments, split your life in two, before and after. And this was the after. Now here I am, standing on the edge of the after. And I'll be honest with you, I do not have all the answers. So let me ask you, truly and openly, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you walk away? Would you close the door quietly? Tell yourself it was nothing but a moment, a spark, something beautiful but fleeting, and then try to forget it ever happened? Would you convince yourself it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a consequence of loneliness and timing and nothing more? Or would you do the opposite? Would you risk everything? Everything you thought your life was supposed to be? Would you step forward into the unknown with someone who arrived uninvited but made it impossible to imagine your life without them? Would you keep walking down that uncertain, messy, dangerous road, hand in hand with someone who didn't ask to change your world, but did anyway? Because the truth is, I'm in it now. Deep, too deep to be objective. Too caught up in the pull of it all to tell whether it's a blessing or a storm waiting to crash. And I don't want to pretend. I don't want to wrap this up in a tidy bow or give you a cliche ending, because this, whatever this is still unfolding. So maybe, just maybe, your voice can help. Tell me, if it were you, what would you do? Would you protect your heart and walk away before it breaks? Or would you leap, knowing full well there's no safety net? Let me know in the comments, because right now, I'm standing in the middle of something raw and real and terrifying, and I'm just trying to figure out what comes next.